You want to do that Daily Wire thing?
Yes, let's get into this.
Thank you to the viewer who wrote in and told us to check this out, by the way. But I always appreciate seeing the Daily Wire do this kind of backstage stuff because I can never kind of understand the need for men like this to overcompensate in the way that they do with the cigars and the drinks and the leather. It's like, we get it. We get it. What are you not telling us?
This is honestly when you're often when you're a small child, you will dress up like an adult. But it'll be like, I'm wearing a cowboy hat, or I'm an astronaut.
A doctor.
I'm a doctor.
Got a stethoscope on.
I'm a stethoscope, or
I'm Spider-Man.
I'm Spider-Man, or something. I'm like you. You will portray an adult. Now you can't wear those costumes as an adult and have it resonate in the same way. So what you do when you have that same mentality as a little boy, and you want to be seen as a real man, what you do is you just do all of these sort of like completely tropish accessories, and you surround yourself in them. So like, for instance, maybe you're like, I'm going to have a Bugatti car or something to that effect. Or what you do is, how can I enhance my masculinity?
Gender affirming care.
Here it is. This is it. And here these guys go.
New sort of, I shouldn't say new, it's been sort of fermenting for the last handful of years, but I think it's really gaining prominence now, both in the very intellectual part of the American right, but also in the very fringe parts of the American right. And the fact that what I'm about to bring up is happening in both of those places, like people who we all in this room read, people with whom we are friendly, people with whom we admire are participating in this conversation. Also, the complete whack jobs, the people who I don't think should have any voice in our movement. I think that they're malevolent forces are also circling the same idea. That makes the idea, I think, something that we should talk about, and that's this idea that the American experiment is over. This idea that none of our institutions that have taken us through the last 2+ centuries on this continent exist anymore, that we can't find any solution to our cultural and political problems through the political system, and that perhaps it's time to look to older systems, strongman, monarchy, even dictator. I mean, when you have
all right, pause. I just want to
voices,
it's easy to get distracted at how all of these
sucking on that phallic object.
Well, these like tiny little men are playing make believe like they're big boys, and it's possible to get distracted from what Jeremy Boring is saying, but he is saying our institution seems to be failing, that there's problems here, and you could stop that conversation there, and we could have had that conversation. The real question becomes, okay, if we accept that premise, and there's some reasons to accept that premise on some level, what is the failure about? Like, what is it? And how do you address it? It would be more democracy, right? Like when we talk about when we talk about institutions failing, or at least a clearer understanding of their failures, it's Congress isn't responsive to people's wishes as much. That billionaires are able to call up the mayor of a city or text the president of the United States and say, hey, I want you to do this. And that money dictates, AIPAC can drop $100 million or $20 million into a congressional primary race. I mean, that's what you mean by failure of institutions. And how do you address that? A rational, normal person would say, well, we need more democracy. And how do we set up our society in such a way that we get more democracy? And maybe it's like, we limit campaign finance, or we tax so that we don't have this distribution of power that puts so much power, economic and political, in one hands. That's one way about going it. And their answer is, we concentrate power even more.
Aristocracy, baby, bring it back.
Exist anymore, that we can't find any solution to our cultural and political problems through the political system, and that perhaps it's time to look to older systems, strongman, monarchy, even dictator. I mean, when you have major voices in the sort of conservative intelligentsia,
Name them.
openly discussing the idea of whether a dictator will be required to save this country, or an emperor would be required to save this country, or a king would be required to save this country, I think that that's something that merits actual conversation.
Okay, so let's be clear here. In the Claremont Institute, all those guys at the Claremont Institute are doing that. Let's be clear what's going on here. It's not that it merits being addressed, and we need to push back on this movement that's burgeoning in the right. And incidentally, he's even saying, like, he's talking about the Groypers, because there's a big fight with the Daily Wire and Candace Owen and the Groypers, because, you know, all of a sudden, Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring are like, oh, wait a second, they're talking about Jews. That seems somewhat problematic.
Why are my replies filled with Christ is King?
I mean, I didn't realize that we just thought we could be racist. We didn't realize that this would involve Jews. I mean, when has that ever happened? And so despite the fact that they know this is also being embraced by people who want to be authoritarian and also sort of like, you know, get rid of the Jews. They're like, we need to consider this. We just want to do it the right way. Here we go.
Well, I just want to say this is the new way that the right is kind of moving, right? I mean, gone are the days, I think, of the branding of the Bush era, or like the neocon orthodoxy being the thing that they put to the forefront. And like this almost flag waving patriotism of this, because there's nothing more anti-American than what they're saying right here. I mean, the rosiest picture of us declaring independence from Britain was in part because we wanted to get out of a monarchy and to develop a republic that had some democratic elements in it. So this is extremely anti-American, and they're not even really shying away from that. I think 20 or 30 years ago, conservatives would be saying, like, screw the monarchy, right? But maybe not. I don't know. But this is more like, this is Steve Bannon's vision taking over the Republican Party. It's Orban, it's Bolsonaro, it's Trump, it's Modi. This is the future of far-right politics in the world.
There's a strain of conservative thought, the Straussians, who perceived a dynamic where really, like, the elite are basically the parents and need to be doing this. But these guys are now making it a popular movement for a dictator. I wonder what they see on the political horizon where they may want to till the ground for this idea. Like, who might that person be in the future? But let's continue.
An emperor would be required to save this country, or a king would be required to save this country. I think that that's something that merits actual conversation. So I thought, rather than talking about the latest stupid thing Joe Biden said, or, you know, the most salacious details from the Trump trial, although they are fun to talk about, let's talk about something that we can only talk about when we're together. Let's get to the deep stuff.
So, Michael, you're a monarchist.
Yeah, well, they tie in. He pins it on the Catholic, that we're all crypto-monarchists. We all think Trump is Caesar.
I didn't say crypto.
Yeah. And by the way, we don't think that Donald Trump ought to be Caesar. We think that Baron Trump ought to be Caesar. Okay, those are very different things. No, look,
good stuff.
The problem is this. I am not calling for the overthrow of the American regime. The problem is that the American regime has been overthrown.
Pause it just real quickly.
And
These are like
been
failed Hollywood people sitting around like they're at the Constitutional Congress.
It's unbelievable. It really is sort of astonishing.
The overthrow of the American regime. The problem is that the American regime has been overthrown. And it has been overthrown by the 17th Amendment, which fundamentally orders the relationship of the states to the federal government. It's been overthrown by Congress giving away all of its power to the executive agencies. It's been overthrown by any number of things that have taken place, not over the
Can you
last
just
10
pause
years.
it really
but
briefly?
over-
You don't even need to take it off the screen. But when he talks about the 17th Amendment there, that is literally an anti-democracy argument because that allowed for, if I'm not mistaken, the democratic election of senators, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is him saying
Too much democracy
Senate-
has.
the Senate is
110
too
years ago.
democratic. The filibuster Senate is too democratic for Michael Knowles.
Yeah.
over the past 150 and 200 years. And even that is not necessarily to be lamented. It just happens. You can't rewind the tape. You can't go back in time. But the argument to look towards certain classical thinkers, notably Polybius, is that there are different kinds of government. Our founding fathers and framers wrote about this a lot, and I think they were channeling Aristotle and Polybius. Polybius's idea of the cycle of regimes is that you got three acceptable forms of regime, and then you've got their kind of evil twins. So you've got monarchy, which can be good. Monarchy, when it's good, is governing for the common good. When it goes bad, it's a tyranny, and it's just like a dictator for his own self-aggrandizement. Aristocracy can be good. There have been good aristocracies. Aristocracy means good, or governing for the good. The bad version of that is oligarchy. We see those all around the world. Democracy can be good. A republic can be a really good thing. But it turns into mob rule when it goes bad.
Democracy
And you ignore the
and republic,
common
same
good and
thing
you
now?
govern for yourself. And our framers and founding fathers wrote about that ad nauseum.
No, but pause it. But what they wrote about also was the fact that the monarchy was something where you couldn't have actual representation of the people. He's avoiding that entire premise that the founders were explicitly anti-monarchy. Maybe like if you were to poll Americans and ask what the founding fathers' opinions on politics were, just the number one thing people would say would be they didn't want to have a king anymore.
Especially the regular people. Like Thomas Paine was more popular with everyday people than most of the founding fathers were because he spoke to them with like common sense and that sort of stuff.
But here's the bottom line. They are anti-democratic. I mean, this is just the bottom line. They
This is
are
the republic, not a
anti-democratic.
democracy,
They are basically saying that, look, sometimes this form of government, sometimes that form of government works, sometimes this form of government works better. And of course, what better means
Right.
is a function of like where you stand in society, incidentally. But fundamentally, what they're saying is we do not like democracy. And certainly, you need checks and balances within a democracy. Certainly, there are things that society leans into or maintains that are unjust. But on some level, like when everybody agrees to like what our aspirations are in a society, you set up systems in which to determine, are we pursuing those aspirations? For example, every man is created equal. When those words were written, people were slaves.
Yep.
The aspiration is there. You set up mechanisms in which to make sure that we are carrying out those aspirations. And sometimes they break down. Sometimes you need to have politics and a war to rectify certain things, and they don't get fully rectified. But the point is a subscription to the idea that democracy, the idea of as many people as you can in a society having the ability to dictate their future and their destiny within the context of that society, is in and of itself a positive trait. And these guys simply do not subscribe to that.
They don't
notion.
believe that. They don't believe in government, right? So government, a good test of government's health is its responsiveness to the people, right? And they see that it's become less, it's because it's not sufficiently responsive, and they think, let's make it even less responsive so we can just have a sole person making decisions and what's good for the rest of people, a strong man.
I'm not even convinced that they believe that it's less responsive to the people. I think they just think it's less responsive to them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think they do see the problem with like, there's too many, and who might those be? Too many people are getting too much of a say in our society.
Too many wokes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. It's, for a long time, we were able to run everything. We look around this room and we would represent the diversity of where we would be on every other channel and to every other context and every other format. there would be different types of people. There would be a bald guy, and then a young guy, and then a guy with a beard, and then a guy in a sport coat. And that would be the diversity that you would have. And now it's just off to the races. Go ahead.
So the question is, where are we in that cycle of regimes? Unless you believe that America just paused history, if you really believe we've as Fukuyama, at the very least, is caricatured as having said, that we've reached the end of history and it's over and liberal democracy
I'm sorry,
won.
who said that?
Francis Fukuyama.
Okay.
Having said that we've reached the end of history and it's over and liberal democracy won. And unless you think history is really over, then you do have to entertain the possibility that something will come next.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know who those guys are that you just mentioned.
There's some buddies of mine from New York.
Polybius? Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of,
Wait,
I agree almost with the diagnosis of the people you're talking about, Jeremy, that I do think that the institutions are fundamentally broken. I don't see any political solution to it, but I also don't think that a dictator is the solution either. So essentially, we're just screwed. Is where I land on it, I guess.
I might have.
Anybody watching this is sniffing just farts, just straight sniffing farts.
they actually, after this, they actually try and sell it bottled.
The Daily Wire, the air.
Oh
It
my
smells crazy. In there.
I got an email from somebody who was at who has been to the Joe Rogan Club in Austin, Texas. Heard people
The comedy mothership?
yeah, and heard people there get uptight about like criticizing of King Charles. Like they're sensitive to the, and it's just bizarre.
What?
Bro, King
Yeah.
Charles had a tough job.
Yeah, man. He's the king. It's very weird.
Wait. Okay.
It's becoming, I think it's becoming a thing on the right.
Monarchist. I mean, TPUK is legit just explicitly monarchist.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I get that, but
And this is
I
the same
thought-
people who have always been saying republic, not democracy.
I know. I just would have thought that the kind of, I don't know, the America hell yeah people would be a little bit more suspicious of monarchy. I
No.
mean, maybe not a strong man,
They
but
say America hell yeah because
Yeah.
they're traitors. It's
Right.
like the frat boys at Ole Miss who up until 2 years ago were flying the Confederate battle flag and now all of a sudden need to tear down the Palestinian one because they love the American flag so much. It's just because they know that they're actually the traitors.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.